Python, doctest versus unittest. I'm trying to get started with unit testing in Python, and I was wondering if someone could explain the advantages and disadvantages of doctest and unittest. What conditions would you use each for?
Both are valuable. I use both doctest and knows taking the place of unittest. I use doctest for cases where the test is giving an example of usage that is actually useful as documentation. Generally, I don't make these tests comprehensive, aiming solely for informative. I'm effectively using doctest in reverse, not to test my code is correct based on my doctest, but to check that my documentation is correct based on the code. The reason is that I find comprehensive doc tests will clutter your documentation far too much, so you will either end up with either unusable doc strings, or incomplete testing. For actually testing the code, the goal is to thoroughly test every case, rather than illustrate what is does by example, which is a different goal which I think is better met by other frameworks.
I use unittest almost exclusively. Once in a while, I'll put some stuff in a doc string that's usable by doctest. 95% of the test cases are unittest. Why? I like keeping doc strings somewhat shorter and more to the point. Sometimes test cases help clarify a doc string. Most of the time, the application's test cases are too long for a doc string.
Another advantage of doc testing is that you get to make sure your code does what your documentation says it does. After a while, software changes can make your documentation and code do different things. Smile.
I work as a bioinformatician, and most of the code I write is one-time, one-task scripts, code that will be run only once or twice and that execute a single specific task. In this situation, writing big unit tests may be overkill, and doc tests are an useful compromise. They are quicker to write, and since they are usually incorporated in the code, they allow to always keep an eye on how the code should behave, without having to have another file open. That's useful when writing small script. Also, doc tests are useful when you have to pass your script to a researcher that is not expert in programming. Some people find it very difficult to understand how unit tests are structured. On the other hand, doc tests are simple examples of usage, so people can just copy and paste them to see how to use them. So, to resume my answer, doc tests are useful when you have to write small scripts, and when you have to pass them or show them to researchers that are not computer scientists.